Imagine writing your entire first draft, start to finish, in 6 months or less. Okay. So, not someday, not over the next 5 years, not after rewriting one chapter 37 times. I mean, a real complete first draft that includes the emotional momentum we've been talking about, with characters that actually feel alive and jump off the page, with scenes that don't feel flat but are very emotional and juicy and that a reader just can't stop reading. And with the kind of clarity for you, the author, that makes you want to sit down and write because you know exactly what you're going to be writing, exactly what the emotion behind it is, and exactly how you're going to convey it on the page. Because if you've been working on your first draft for years, this video might just change everything for you. If you're watching this video, I'm going to guess something. You are not a beginner. You are not someone who decided yesterday that writing sounds kind of fun. You've already been putting in the work. You've read the craft books. You've watched the YouTube videos. You've gone down the free online writing blog rabbit holes. You've probably downloaded templates. You may even have outlined multiple times. Maybe you outlined, then when you started writing, completely threw away your outline, but then you got stuck and went back to outlining again. And yet, despite all of this, at the end of the day, you still don't have your first draft written. Let me know in the comments if any of this feels familiar to you. 1, have you been working on your novel for years? 2, you have a story premise that you love, but the middle kind of collapsed. Maybe you rewrite one part of the story over and over and over again. Your scenes feel kind of flat and blah, even when the plot is technically fine. You keep wondering, will this resonate with readers? Or are they going to be bored with it? Are they going to think it's kind of stupid? Maybe you start out very impassioned, but then you hit a wall partway through and lose all of your momentum. Comment below which of those is your biggest sticking point, because I really want you to hear this. You do not need more effort. You do not need more discipline. And you definitely don't need another plot-based writing template. What you need is a completely different approach. And today I'm going to use myself and my experience as a case study, because I was the writer who took years to finish anything. I remember when I was in college taking multiple semesters off from school so I could write my book, and the end of the semester would come and I had a chapter or two at most. I did not finish it. I did not. And it wasn't because I didn't sit down to do the writing. It's because I did, and I just couldn't make the words come out. It wasn't that I didn't want it really badly. I wanted it so badly. And it wasn't that I wasn't talented. What I did write, I would put through critique groups, and everyone said that I had talent. My writing was really good. So what was the problem then? The problem was I was trying to build stories from the wrong foundation. I would sit down to write. I would have some scenes. I would have some ideas, maybe some really cool moments that I was excited about. But I didn't have the emotional engine underneath that would drive the story, that would hook the reader, that would bring everything together in this cohesive, self-contained storytelling, right? So I would try harder. I would think maybe it's just this project. I need to, switch, craft another book, outline something different, right? I would Google things like how to fix the saggy middle of a story, how to make my characters stronger, how to outline like Brandon Sanderson, things like that. And I would fall into these endless rabbit holes of these free online writing blogs. Have you done this where you open up a tab and then there are links to other articles and they sound pretty good too? So you open up those tabs and pretty soon you've got 20 tabs, each with an article about writing, and you read through them and you actually do get some pretty good nuggets of information, maybe a few inspirations here and there. But at the end of the day, you still didn't know what was going to happen next in your story, or you still didn't know how to finish your first draft, right? So then your head's buzzing and you feel like you've spent 2 hours looking at all this stuff, but you still don't have solutions. So you were getting information, and maybe good information, but that wasn't helping you make progress. And you have to understand that great information is not the same as completing your first draft. And the worst part of all of this was that when I did write, it felt kind of flat. Have you ever written something and then read it back to yourself and it feels kind of amateurish or trite compared to the authors that you really love to read, almost like a junior high schooler wrote it or something? I mean, it just feels kind of flat, like something's missing. And it might be grammatically correct, so you don't know how to make it any better. And then that makes you doubt whether readers will feel anything when they read it. That's how I used to feel all the time. I couldn't tell if it was good. I couldn't tell if it mattered. And that is one of the most frustrating and exhausting places to be as a fiction writer, because you know enough to care, but you don't know how to finish and you don't know how to bridge those two things. So here's what I kept running into. I could outline, but I wasn't fully drafting. I knew plot beats, but not how to incorporate the emotional momentum. I could write scenes, but they didn't connect. I kept second guessing everything I did, everything I was writing, and I didn't trust that the story was actually working. And this is where I realized something that changed everything for me. As much as I loved plot-based templates, they are not designed to help you finish your first draft. They're designed to organize the events, the external events of your story. But plot events, no matter how interesting they are, do not hook a reader. Emotion hooks a reader. Transformation of characters hooks a reader. Readers are not going to stay up till 2 a.m. turning pages because the twist in Act 3 was technically correct, okay? That is not how it works. They stay up because something inside that character is breaking open, because they are feeling the struggle of this character and they have to know how it turns out. And no plot-based template can give you that. Okay, so this is when I shifted. And the shift for me was I stopped trying to write from the plot first. I started writing from the emotion first and basing the way that I crafted my stories around the psychology of human transformation. I started using emotion as my foundation and layering the plot on top of it rather than vice versa. I started asking things like, who is my character at their core? What are they becoming? What kind of emotional truths are they struggling with? What are their limiting beliefs? How will they have to face these limiting beliefs in the climactic moment? Will it change them, and how? And when I started doing that, drafting stopped feeling like pushing a boulder uphill, and it started feeling inevitable. The story just flowed and spilled out of me, and it was so perfect and it worked so well. And then there was all this emotion, right? So here's the truth. In my program, I help authors write their first draft in 6 months or less, but the truth really is that writing your draft is not about writing faster. It's about writing more effectively with emotional clarity on your story. Because when you know the transformation, you know what the next scene is going to be. You know what it has to be. And the reader will feel that that is the only thing that could happen next. When you know what the emotional pressure is on the character, you're not going to get stuck. When you know the kinds of emotional things that your character is moving through, the story starts to write itself and just pull the character through. And this is what most writers are missing. Not motivation, not talent, not dedication or discipline. They're missing the psychological roadmap. So now this is the process I follow when I write any of my stories. First, I'm going to map the character's internal transformation. I do tend to get up on my soapbox about this a lot, but so many authors, they either don't do the internal transformation or they do it as an afterthought. No, it should be the first thing that you figure out in detail. Maybe we do conceive of our stories based on the plot or based on the characters or based on the romance, what have you. But once you know what your premise is, you need to stop everything else and first figure out that internal transformation. It is the bedrock foundation of your story, okay? Second, I journal emotionally through each step. So as we talked about in the last video, you're going to start journaling, creative discovery through structured journaling, and you're going to figure everything out through your subconscious creativity. Only after that will I figure out the plot. Even though they're external events, I still base them on human transformational psychology. Then when I build my scenes, I do it in a cause and effect manner because that gives more emotion to the scenes. We can see how emotion is driving the character's choices and therefore driving the plot, and we see the emotional consequences of each scene. And only then do I start writing. And by the time that I do that, I have so much detailed clarity on each and every scene. I know not only what happens in the scene, I know what the emotion is going into the scene, what the character's motivations are going into the scene, how they change based on what happens in the scene, how the character feels at the end of the scene, how that's going to drive their next choices or actions as we move into the next scene. You see how that's completely different than sitting down and saying, oh, this is the scene where Bob and Sally get in a fight, and then not really knowing what that looks like on the page. It's a completely different experience. I promise you that. When you follow this process, you stop needing another template, another random plotting method. You stop needing more online free writing blogs. You stop needing to rewrite the chapter over and over again. You stop needing to jump to another project because you're stuck on this one. You'll finally have the tools that will tell you this is what should be happening in this part of the story. This is what the character feels. This is what the character is confronting right now. And because you know your character, you're going to know what that looks like for them. And when you do this, suddenly 6 months to write a book, it's not insane anymore. It's actually very normal and very easy to do because you're not wondering what's going to happen and overloading your brain because it doesn't know what to do next. This is exactly how I'm writing a very long epic fantasy series. I have 6 point of view characters, and every single one of them has their own internal arcs, external arcs, transformations, you name it. But I can map out both their internal and external arcs for each of those characters in about a week. I already know what I'm doing for them in a general way for most of the books in the series, and I know how it's going to end. And that means when I sit down to write, I'm not guessing. That's really important. I'm not guessing. I'm crafting a masterpiece based on real human psychology, real human experience that your reader will resonate with. Because they are human beings, they will feel what your reader is feeling. It will feel real to them, and they will latch onto that character, and they will return to you and everything you write over and over and over again because they know you can give them that emotional experience. So let me say this clearly one more time. You do not need plot-based templates to save you. You do not need endless surface level craft advice. You do not need more writing time. You do not need more discipline hacks. You do not need one more candle to help make your writing. You do not need one more candle or one more way to feng shui your writing space so that it is more conducive to creative flow. You don't need more random Pinterest outlines. None of that. What you need is the emotional infrastructure of the story. You need transformational human psychology inside of your story, and you need to write from your own subconscious creativity. That is what creates momentum. That is what creates resonance for the reader. It's what makes readers feel something about your story, and it's what makes your first draft suddenly very finishable. And this is exactly what I teach, a step-by-step program that walks you through every part of story. You're going to get the psychology of every part, the emotional transformation underneath the plot, journaling tools and prompts that will unlock each part of story for you, exactly what to journal on, what you need to plan, what you must craft for this part, and a roadmap that gets you to a complete draft in 6 months or less. Because writing isn't about forcing plot onto the page. It's about bearing the soul of your character to your reader so that the reader can watch them transform. And the beauty of fiction and of storytelling is in the struggle along the way to that transformation. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to show you what this looks like in actual steps. That way you can stop spinning, stop rewriting, and finally finish your novel.